Hello, and welcome back to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, Mmmm, and today I'm joined once again with Catherine Cooke here to do a spoiler review of the Mandalorian series, episodes 1 through 3. I've always wanted to do a review like this, and with the upcoming Book of Boba Fett series, which starts at chapter 17, it seemed perfect to do this since it picks up right after the Mandalorian series seems to end. So we're going to be covering the first 3 episodes of The Mandalorian, Chapter 1, The Mandalorian, Chapter 2, The Child, and Chapter 3, The Sin. How are you today, Catherine?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. We really got a treat with this series, I have to say. And there was so much anticipation with this series because I know that there were trailers that went out, and we've discussed in the past that the trailers didn't indicate anything other than the fact that there would be a Mandalorian in the series. And, we did end up getting a surprise, and that surprise is revealed at the end of episode 1. But I have to say that the first opening scenes of The Mandalorian really set the tone of what perhaps is a typical day in the life of this particular Mandalorian, searching for a bounty on Maul Kreese. And when the series came out, it was really funny because we had seen so many Mandalorians in the Clone Wars, through the years, and to finally see them in live action, I couldn't be more thrilled to see that. So can we just even talk just a little bit about how popular the Mandalorians have become over the past few years even?
Yeah, because it's like, obviously in the expanded universe, there was a ton of history there for who the Mandalorians were. But then when they announced this, it was kind of their way of taking a mulligan on Boba Fett, which is ironic because they eventually did bring Boba Fett into it. Because for a while they had been trying to develop a potential like Boba Fett movie. And then it's like, well, let's just do people like Mandalorians. Let's just do this. And that way we could kind of tell our own story with it. And like even the cold open, it's like, okay, this is gonna be cool, like a Mandalorian bounty hunter show, and it's not gonna have to worry about, the canon tie-ins with Boba Fett at first because we're doing this brand new character. And it is interesting the way the series, or particularly the first episode, in terms of where it ends up, like you said, with a big surprise, and it's like, oh, it's a big bait and switch from what was marketed versus what the series ends up becoming about.
Yeah, that's for sure. And as you said, we got to see the Mandalorian in action right away from the get-go. He starts off sort of, working, and he's in search of a Mythrol. And, we're given this kind of zany Mythrol character who is like, oh, are you searching for me? You can't be searching for me. I'm a good guy. You don't possibly want me. And it's kind of charming because the Mandalorian character, at least in the first few minutes, comes across as a very stoic, quiet type of character, and that Mythrol kind of fills in a lot of the gaps of the quietness. But we get such a great production design here, along with the voice acting, sometimes, and the live action acting of the voice acting of Pedro Pascal, or the live action acting of Pedro Pascal and the other people who share that Mandalorian suit for Din Djarin. But we also get in this first episode, we finally see that amazing view of Din Djarin's Razor Crest, which is just looks really good in that first view that they show to you. What did you think of the ship when you first saw it?
It reminded me of the general shape of the engines on it, almost like a pod racer or something, or kind of like a truncated version of the Queen's Royal Starship in episode 1, because it has the two big the clone trooper gunship from Attack of the Clones. So I'm like, that's kind of neat. It feels almost like it's a mishmash of other designs, which makes sense because it being in universe, not everything's going to be wildly different. Of course, you take inspiration for other things, kind of like we have a billion different versions in our own universe of SUVs and sedans, all have a little similar appearance to them. So I love the Razor Crest all because it does have its own character to it, despite that. And
Yeah, it certainly does. It has a unique design. It's appealing looking, and it looks somewhat, I'm not going to say sleek, but it looks, somewhat maneuverable. And we learned that, from the Mythrol at least, that Mando is kind of flying under the radar. And that makes sense because if you're doing bounty hunting, you certainly don't want, to have like a transponder on and everybody knowing exactly where you're going every minute. So we even get a chance in this first episode to finally see somebody get frozen in carbonite, which has become a significant meme, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. And it's like the fact that he actually has like a smaller portable carbon chamber. And this one, of course, is not like the one from Cloud City, which was meant like Lando had warned Vader. This is specifically used for, cargo. It's not for people. Whereas this one clearly, it's like, oh, they took a cue in the 10 years since, or the 6 years rather, since Empire Strikes Back. It's like, oh, everybody heard about Han being trapped in carbonite. And like the War of the Bounty Hunters comic strip, all these bounty hunters are going after him. It's like, oh, you put a human in carbonite and he lived. So clearly that subgenre technology has taken off. And I did love that whole back and forth with Mando and the Mythrol, because the fact that Mando's just not talking and just completely ignoring him, it does a lot of character development in and of itself. Like, yeah, this guy's done this 1,000 times. I'm not going to listen to you try and bribe your way out of this or try and be my friend. And I thought that was so cool because it does tell you a lot about him. And you also don't even hear or see Mando come down into the belly of the ship when he does, surprise the Mythrol, who of course makes a reference to Life Day. And it's like, oh, because of course Jon Favreau. I mean, he says he loves the holiday special 1978. I don't know if he's saying that sarcastically or not, but he's worked it into canon now. So, and I don't know if it's just, maybe you thought so too, but the person that the Mythrol is looking at in the carbonite, it looked to me a lot like Jon Favreau, and it might have been because they've done little teases like that in other movies. And it, because it's like the same type of hair and mustache and beard and his hands up. I'm like, is that Favreau? I can't tell.
That would be a hell of an Easter egg, and I'm sure we can find out somewhere if that's true. But I wouldn't be surprised with all the cleverness that's been put into this series that we would get something like that, something so cool like that. And I remember the Mythrol kind of looking at the rows of carbon frozen individuals and just saying, oh my goodness, and of course, as you said, Mando suddenly, or Din suddenly shows up behind him and puts him in the chamber. That was something else that we haven't really seen before either, is someone being placed in, into that, I guess, the mold. And then,
Right.
We got to see that. And then, of course, he was fully frozen in carbonite. But that was kind of a fun sequence because that's something that I certainly enjoy seeing. And, it put his job into context, collecting these bounties. And, shortly after that, we see Mando meeting Grief Karga and Navarro. And, Mando's eager to start more jobs. Seems like, the jobs just aren't out there that are paying a lot. And, especially since the Empire fell, things seem to be very shaky. But Mando accepts this job from the client. And this client who he takes the job from is very mysterious. And he seems to have Imperial ties because he has these stormtroopers, the remnant troopers. And he gives him an ingot of Beskar as a down payment. What went through your mind when the client popped up with this ingot of Beskar for Din?
It was interesting because on the one hand, when Grief Karga first offered him the job and told him about it, everybody in the bar stops and looks like it's okay. So clearly this client is somebody everybody knows. And so when he presents the Beskar thing in conjunction with that, it's like, I mean, this is the first time we really heard about the Beskar, but the fact that you could tell that Mando regards this as something significant. It's not just, oh, hey, here's this metal, it's valuable, it's worth money. It's like a cultural thing. And that's like automatically adding a whole new layer to the Mandalorians we haven't really seen before. And so I'm like, okay, and I could just imagine, because this guy's with the Empire, that he's probably just ransacked Mandalore and stolen everything and just because if you see that each of the pauldrons have like their own Imperial emblem on it. It's like they've already restacked it and shaped it, and it's like, oh man, I could see how this would be really upsetting for for Din Djarin to see this, and yet he accepts the down payment anyway and fully intends to uphold the deal. He's like, he doesn't seem to be offended, and of course, other Mandalorians are gonna have a problem with that. Hey, you're working for the Empire, type of thing. So it tells you a little bit about his character too. It's like he doesn't really seem to care about the fact that, yeah, it's like, yeah, the Empire's fallen, this guy's here, and he's probably really evil, and he's probably done my people really dirty, but whatever, I'm just going to take the money and, do it anyway.
Yeah, you make a good point. I mean, as I said a few minutes ago, we saw Grief Karga struggling to pay Din, and now here's this client offering him so much for a job with barely any information, and we knew it was going to be tough going for Din with something, this sort of setup of high payment but very little information. This one must be sort of like a special job. So now I don't know about you, but my eyes lit up when I saw Din go into the enclave of the Mandalorians. And upon entering, we see a bunch of young children with Mando helmets on playing. I mean, even the Mythosaurus skull at the door, we see this, incredible enclave where they're at. And we meet, a character called the Armorer. But this character isn't just an armorer, is it?
Not at all. She's really interesting because she's she's this very, she kind of goes down the checklist with him too and makes sure that, okay, you've done this, you've done that, or have you ever taken off your helmet before? No, has it ever been forcibly removed? No. And there's clearly the other Mandalorians in there have a lot of respect for her. And that's where we learn a little bit more about his particular offshoot, because the notion that a Mandalorian couldn't take off their helmet was like what? Because that wasn't in the Clone Wars. Like, even the Death Watch took their helmets off. So we're seeing that, okay, this is clearly a different offshoot of the Mandalorians. And it's around this, and once she starts taking the pauldron to forge a little pauldron for her shoulder, you see this like a hectic flashback sequence of Din Djarin, presumably as a child, with this attack. Presumably in the Clone Wars, you see some super battle droids around, and it's like, okay, because earlier he mentions that when he tried to hail a taxi, it was being driven remotely by like an R2 unit. And he's like, no droids. And that's something which is interesting that kind of carries through the first two seasons of the show, is his relationship with the droids, and how it's very much something that you can tell it's traumatized him. And this, I can't. It's like, I don't trust it. I don't care that the whole galaxy is overly dependent on droids. I do not want anything to do with it. And so it's like, okay, so the way they spool this out feels a lot more natural. Like, it's not like a giant exposition dump. Like, it makes sense when he's watching her, smash this together, and as a in the kiln, that all the sparks and everything that are shooting off is reminding him of like the chaos and stuff that he saw as a kid. So it flows like really well, and I think that we'll be definitely seeing more of the Armorer in the future. I can't imagine that she will be leaving us anytime soon.
Yeah, she clearly does play an important role. Right away, you notice that she has a different helmet than everyone else, and it looks very special. I mean, I don't know what it's made out of. I'm sure there's forums about what it's made out of, but it looks expensive looking, like a very well made, fine piece helmet that must have cost a lot. And a lot of people were speculating that the horns on the helmet are probably like Darth Mirian horns, which makes sense since Maul was the leader of it's not Death Watch, is it?
No, Maul went to Death Watch and a few other enclaves, and he and like Black Sun and a few other places, and he formed the Shadow Collective, that he called it.
Right.
And
the Shadow Collective.
Yeah, they went to Mandalore during the Clone Wars, and they overthrew Duchess Satine's administration, and then he killed the head of the Death Watch as well, Pre Vizsla, and just kind of took charge for himself. And it seemed like there was this all-out chaos and war, but then he got kidnapped, and unfortunately, the series had gotten canceled before they finished that story, so they finished it off in a comic book,
yes,
called Son of Dathomir. But then you get to come back to Mandalore later on in season 7 and see what's kind of how things have gone. But I think you're right that the fact that you do have like the Dathomirian, the Zabrak horns on there gives it like, oh, maybe she is from that sect, because but very strict. She's very much not a bullshitter. And I feel with the way the show has been going, that maybe she and Mando may not be, buddy if she pops up again.
Yeah, there could be something to that side of the story. And what's really interesting is last year, 2020, we were very lucky because we were treated to that season 7 of the Clone Wars finale. We were very lucky to get that, and then following that, we got the Mando series. And, it was truly just such an amazing time to be a Star Wars fan, to get all of that. We got that special scene with Ahsoka and Anakin, and it flows right into I think it's Revenge of the Sith, right before he goes into that battle, I guess at Coruscant, or let's say the space around Coruscant, on the planet. And it just really was such a great, we were so lucky to get that. But, of course, Maul was featured in that great duel between he and Ahsoka, where she bests him and traps him, and then eventually ends up, having to let him go. So I thought that was a really cool twist to the story, that she had to kind of release him so that he could, be a distraction on the ship for her, so she could escape from Order 66. But
Yeah.
that really was just such a great series we got. And so I imagine that those horns must have something to do with it, as you mentioned too. And one other kind of interesting thing about the armorer is that, Din brings that ingot to her, and also he tends to bring information to her. So, she's sort of like the main, commanding officer, maybe not, but his
Right.
commanding officer.
Right, because one of this really, big Mandalorian guy comes in there and he takes issue with the fact that Din clearly got this from the Empire, because he sees that all the pieces are stamped with the Imperial logo, and the guy's about to fight him and trying to pry his helmet off, and the armor is the one who puts a stop to that, because she's like, "Hey, we're not having any of this here," and they're like, "Oh, sorry," but they kind of back off. So yeah, you can tell she's definitely top dog at this particular literal underground sect.
Yes, and I think it might be the heavy Mando that he gets into a fight with, and you get to see this massive Mandalorian. He's big, and he has he just packs an incredible punch. And Mando isn't sort of like losing anything to it, but it's just kind of nice to see the sparring even within their community. And they have the vibro blades, which is a special blade, and they kind of pull the vibro blades on one another, and it's really an exciting kind of fun sparring session that they have right there. And she cuts them down to size, as you said. But we also see that she has some incredible tools there, as she's a forger. And they're very specialized, very, very special tools. They're very accurate, in shape and size. She has this down to a science, and it's nice to see some of the special abilities that the Mandalorian clans have, which obviously include making weapons, which is what we've learned is part of their religion. But getting back to the flashback about Din's life, I have to say that was also something I wasn't expecting to see in the first few minutes of the first episode. And it was great, because you kind of got the sense that this man has had, a turbulent life, and there was this confrontation. So, I'm guessing, and I'm sure people who are watching it may have realized that he didn't start off as a Mandalorian. Is that right, Catherine?
Right. He was from another planet, and he, as we see through the flashbacks throughout the series, they were under attack by the Separatists. The droid forces killed his parents, and he was rescued at like the last second by the arrival of Children of the Watch, which is the name we learn later on in the series as the name of his specific sect, if you will. And they rescued him, and for them, Mandalorian is more of it's a creed. It's not, or not just for them, but for all Mandalorians. It's like, I mean, sure, if you're born on the planet Mandalore, then yeah, you'd be Mandalorian by nationality, but also it's Mandalorian by creed, and that's like a way of life. It's not simply whether you're from the planet or not. So yes, he got adopted into it, which is basically the old expanded universe backstory for Jango Fett as well. He was from the planet Conquered Dawn. He was a farmer, and then his family and everybody got wiped out, and the leader of the Mandalorians took an interest in him and decided to take him under his wing, and then he got brought into the ranks, which I think is where the idea initially was floated that, oh, you're not real Mandalorians type thing, but since that's not really canon anymore, because that was relegated to the expanded universe, they decided to, as we mentioned on the Book of Boba Fett anticipation review, that they made sure to recanonize the fact that yes, he is indeed a Mandalorian.
Yes, and I love how they did it here. And, and of course, that just reinforces everything we know about the way Mandalorians behave when they encounter children. They take them in oftentimes as a foundling. And we obviously are seeing that this happened with Din. So Din travels to Arvala 7, and, he's there because he has this tracking fob that he's going to use to find, his most recent bounty that he's in search of. And, when he gets there and lands on the planet, he gets into this fight with a blurg, and he meets Kuil, who pretty much fills him in on the 411 of where he needs to go to find, the bounty. And Kuil is this incredible character who is obviously very wise and very old, because I think he said that he's lived several of their lifetimes. So he's probably hundreds of years old. And he also mentions, he has a catchphrase of "I have spoken." So there was a catchphrase in the beginning of the series was for the Mandalorians was "This is the way." And of course, that's made its way into the cultural norms. And now "I have spoken" is another one. And I can't remember the actor who does the voice for Nick Nolte does such a good job giving us this stoic character who's, kind of like worked for the Empire and seen it all and done it all, perhaps the same way that the Bill Burr character has, being a stormtrooper, so to speak, or working for the Empire. And now, he's telling Mando, I'll help you, but, there are some things we have to agree upon. And, we're getting so much in a storyline in this first episode. And, I'm really intrigued by what we're continuing to see. So, Din approaches the hideout, and he gets an encounter with IG-11. And I kind of really liked this, Catherine, because I really liked how he had to bargain with IG-11. What did you make of Din's interaction with the droid?
Well, at first it's like he just kind of dismisses him out of hand. Oh, it's an assassin droid, but he listens to what IG-11 actually is saying out loud to all the other guys there. And it's like, and then he's like, "Look, I'm in the guild," because it's like a formal bounty hunters guild. And the droid's like, "Okay." But he's also very cautious about it. And he tries to reason with the droid almost as if he thinks it's dumb. Like, "Oh, come on, we're together. We can just do this, blah, blah, blah." Like, he's being very dismissive about it. And they eventually do that. Sort of like how he was interacting with Kuil initially. It's like Kuil is trying, like you said, he's trying to give him the 411, and Din is being a bit dismissive, and he's like, which it kind of is his nature, because he's like done this, thousands of times. Like, look how he interacted with the Mithril. "I'm gonna ignore you. Yeah, I'm doing it." Whereas now that he's at you tell he's not used to having other people besides the armor perhaps telling him how it is, and he doesn't like that. He has a problem with other forms of authority. Whereas with the droid, he's just gonna be, yeah, I don't need to listen to this, blah, blah, blah. And like when IG-11 says, "Oh, I've already laid claim to the bounty," and he's like, "How can you do that? You haven't caught it yet." He's like, "Okay, I hear your logic, I hear your reasoning." And you could just tell that Din is just frustrated with this, but then they're forced to, reluctantly work together as all of these other guys just come out of nowhere, and it's like this big fight. And to this day, they never really explained what the circumstances were as to why the bounty ended up here in the middle of nowhere, and why these people are guarding him. It's like, is this like a rendezvous point? Did they agree to sell him on the black market to somebody else who hasn't shown up yet? It's like, it was a little weird. But then you get, as like an old school Star Wars fan, what I've been wanting to see for ages, you get to see an IG assassin droid just go all out and just wreck shop. And I was so curious about what the movement style was going to be like, because it doesn't look like the most agile of characters. Because in Empire Strikes Back, you couldn't see their feet. It was just like the feet were like cut off, and he's sitting here and he's so ramrod straight. And I'm like, what's this character going to do? And the fact that he actually can, like in the video game, the old Shadows of the Empire back in the 90s, he had rocket boosters for feet. So he would kind of go like that, like taking off. Whereas here it says he has so much dexterity. I was shocked just watching that. And it was so surprising. I'm like, man, I want this guy on my team, and that the droid's constant issue of, "Oh, I failed, I'm going to self-destruct now," type of thing. And that was like, and Amanda repeatedly having to tell him, "No, don't self-destruct, damn it." That was really funny. And it's like,
it was really funny. I mean, they had this chemistry, and with a droid, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, I haven't seen a droid this intriguing since K2SO, who obviously was a more sophisticated droid, but to be right in the action and to have a mission and have to kind of coax him, away from the ledge so many times, and it come off as being, they're finally partners and they can work together, took some effort, in addition to Mando having to fight his way against this heavily guarded asset. I mean, there were a lot of guards there, and they had, I think it might have been a repeating cannon. I'm not sure what kind of cannon it was, but they had a cannon, and it was kind of a tough fight. But both the IG-11 unit and Din have been in tough binds like this before, and they managed to overcome their I think Mando jumps on the rifle on the cannon and
Well,
uses it
yeah,
against
like
the same guys.
he even wrangles it over to himself. He shoots like the cling wire grappling hook over to pull it while it's firing, and the guy unintentionally shoots a bunch of his own guys because he didn't shut it off in time. And then he jumps on it and finishes off the rest of them. And I love how they do the next transition shot where the camera cuts to inside the building, looking at the door, and you're seeing the door get like soldered off around the edges.
It's very cleverly done. How else would they get into what is essentially like a fortress, the way that it's armored and closed up to get to the asset? And so once they knock down the doors with great effort, as you mentioned, they get in there. There's a few other baddies, and then they have, using the tracking fob, they find the asset, and then of course, we get the reveal of an iconic character, which is my favorite character, Baby Yoda, which is what we've all been calling him. His name is Grogu, which of course we know now. And, clearly, Mando is greatly affected by this. And I kind of like this because, here's, the scenario here where a Mandalorian is coming across, a foundling or a baby. And his reaction is very, very different to that of IG-11. Who, kind of says something like, well, it's too bad, that it's going to get killed. And, of course, it's a heartless, thoughtless comment because he's a machine. But, Mando Din Djarin is not standing for that, is he?
Well, no, and it was also interesting because Din Djarin's directive was to bring the asset back. And it was interesting. It was funny because when the client initially told him to bring the child or bring the asset, he says bring it alive, and then Dr. Pershing is like, no, we need the asset alive. It's what we discussed it. And then of course, Great Werner Herzog, he leans across the desk and he very clearly, implicitly tells him, oh, but I understand things can like go wrong in this line of work. Clearly saying, I want you to kill the asset. He wants the evidence that the asset is dead. Which is why IG-11 is like game to do that and just raises the gun. Oh, it's interesting. It might be a child, and even when Din is like, but how could this be important to anything? Is this a kid? And IG-11's like, well, some species age differently, and you have that great shot from behind Grogu's head with the ears, and you just know immediately. And the way IG-11 just says, oh, I guess we'll never know, as he raises the gun, and you know what's going to happen before it happens, And I love how they do that shot. It's like a close-up on Din on his helmet, and you see the flash and the reflection. And of course, he killed the droid. It just, I think he had to.
Exactly, because Din could not go ahead and let this IG-11 unit kill this adorable baby. And, to be honest with you, yes, he is super cute and adorable. But rather than talk about his cuteness, which there's obviously an attractiveness to the wide-eyed creature, I kind of want to talk about the child, because this is what he's known as at that point, his significance in the Star Wars universe. And, he is a Yoda species, and they're rare, and they live long, and they're naturally attuned with Force abilities. And they seem to make it onto Jedi councils a lot. Are they setting up this character to be a new leader in the ways of the Force, either dark or light?
That's a good question because he's 50 years old, which is interesting because that means he was born the same year that Anakin Skywalker was born. And it's like, I wonder, that doesn't sound like it's very random. Like might be a reason for that. And we can tell what the direction the series is going, that they're using the idea that, okay, they clearly want the kid for the Snoke project, the Palpatine project. But it's like, I wonder, because there's still like 25-year gap or so between where we last see Grogu in season 2 before, Luke's entire academy and everything gets burned to the ground. And so it's like, I wonder, I assume he'll show up again at some point, especially because of the way the profitability of the merchandise for that character. You just assume at some point it's going to come back. But it could be a leader at the Jedi at some point, because again, it would, you could have, unless they wanted to make a significant point of, oh, well, the Palpatine project, of course, it has to be sourced from something amazing like Yoda's species. But since the character's still with us, it's like, post season 2, that I assume he's going to go on to do something like that. But again, even as mentioned in season 2, it's like the character, yes, it's a cute little adorable baby now, but it has the potential to go either way in terms of the dark or the light. So that could definitely, I think that's definitely going to come back at some point. And Mando, of course, the reason Din is saving the baby isn't just because it's a cute little baby. It's because it's a foundling. Yeah, like he was. It was in trouble, and it was not just a foundling in trouble. It was in trouble from a droid, like an assassin droid raising the gun to kill him, just like Din was in the basement of the storm cellar or whatever of the house when the super battle droid was raising its guns, and then he got saved. And so it was great because it's like, okay, there's the parallel. So now you can just tell that he is going to be bonded with this kid for the rest of the way.
Certainly. And it was so well executed and done. Even the last scene that you see is their silhouettes of their hands reaching out for one another. And I actually thought about E.T., as well. But I just love that contact, that physical contact that Din had with Grogu, reaching out his little finger to touch Din's hand. And you knew right away, once that connection was made, there's probably nothing that can break it. And so it was a well done ending and quite a surprise at the end of episode 1. So now we find ourselves in episode 2, rightfully named The Child. And Mando, I'm going to start calling him Din. I don't mean to keep calling him Mando because it'll get confusing, but Din is walking with the child, and, he has to get back to his ship so he can return to give the bounty to the client. And, just looking at the child, he seems to be in good condition. He seems to be okay. He's quite surprised to who this guy is who's with him. And, what I loved about this scene is that as Din is walking around, he has this great intuition for trouble or sensing trouble. What stood out to you about this fighting scene at the beginning of this episode?
Well, one, it was just seeing that this gun just totally vaporizes people. I'm like, whoa, But in terms of storytelling, it's like, the first 11 minutes or so of this episode, there's no dialogue. And I love that. It's like, it's just them. They're walking. This is actually my favorite episode so far of all of Mandalorian. So it's like because I love that it's just the kid and him. And it's like they're bonding. They're moving through the desert. And of course, these guys have been sent there because like Kuil warned him. It's like there's been all sorts of chaos going on over here over something. And so it's like, yeah, it's a really quick fight. And the way he just kind of puts the kid out of the way, and the kid's just watching there kind of, oogly eyes at it as he's just blowing these people away. I'm like, yeah, that's great for a little kid to be seeing, but okay. And then they just kind of press on like it's no big deal. And of course, Din did get hurt. And that leads to that interesting scene by the campfire where the baby keeps getting out of the cradle to go and and you could tell what the kid's trying to do. It's not really like you see him closing his eyes and reaching at it. It's like, oh, we see what he's doing here. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I think that's might be the reason scheduling wise why they dropped the second episode as soon as they got the season out as quickly as they did, because force healing showed up a month later in episode 9. And it's like, well, they wanted to establish that beforehand here so you could clearly see what the kid was trying to do. And it's like, okay, so this kid, even though is still a baby, he hasn't been trained in the ways of the Force, but he does have a certain intuition that he's able to master certain techniques. But of course,
yeah, I agree with you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but of course, Din is not really paying attention. It's like, get back in the cradle.
It's so adorable. His little eyes, he's kind of peering over, and he can see Din, fixing his arm and everything. And, I, like you said, seeing him reaching over to Din's arm, his little hand over to do that. And it just like any other child who might reach out to someone to hold them or whatever. And also in the fight that we saw where Din was fighting off those attackers, there was a tracking fob. This person had a tracking fob for the asset. And so I think that was a bit of a foreshadowing, because here's another, it's not so much that tracking fobs are unique. It's just that there was another one for the asset. And so it almost indicated, hey, there might be other people looking for him. Even though Din was given a tracking fob, there may be more than that. And one other thing I did want to mention was that in regards to healing him, we all wanted Baby Yoda to heal Din, because we kind of get a sense that Din is a good guy at this point, which is, very hard to kind of. It's not always something that happens in a story where you kind of are in your mind saying, "Hey, I think this guy might be a good guy." And I think that this character has already kind of won us over in his intentions. We know, or at least we feel like he wouldn't do anything to harm this child. And so I think that that's very interesting and works in very well at the end of the episode, or towards the end, when he has to kind of relinquish custody of the child, so to speak. And so after the night passes, we get the Jawas, who have completely ransacked Din's, Razor Crest. And I did just want to ask you, wasn't that scene of the Jawas taking apart his ship and leaving Din in the dust so satisfying?
That was hilarious. I mean, to see, it's like, yep, that's like, yep, go. I can think of a few places to park your car, and then you come back, and that's what it's going to be. And to see all the Jawas, how efficient they are at it. And they already got they even lined up the sandcrawler like right in front of it with the ramp down, so they just. And I love Din's reaction. He's like, "Yep, no." He just gets out his gun and he just starts vaporizing him, and they're screaming and like, And it's like, and the action scene which follows, it's like, my God, I didn't know that I needed that as a fan. But it's like, and to see the sandcrawler going so fast, it's so surprising, because in the original film, it just kind of goes crawl. And they call it a sand crawler for a reason. I mean, it moves really slowly, which made sense because it was like a model and they built it and it's going all across the sand. Whereas here, to see it going like a sports car like type speeds, with the baby hilariously just kind of sitting in the cradle following behind, and Din is just riding up along this thing, and it's like, and how they're opening all the doors on the side of the sandcrawler to throw this junk out and knock him off, and he just leans in and just grabs some of the chows and throws them out, and it's like, oh man, you're geared to think, of course he's going to take care of this. He's a Mandalorian. This is no problem. And sure enough, he gets to the top. And it's like, yes, and then they all just shoot. I thought it was so funny. And it's just, oh God, okay, I didn't think I would ever in a million years see a Jawa action scene, and versus it being so outmatched too against a Mandalorian, and yet they win.
Yeah, the Jawas are tough, right? I mean, and they probably used his own weapons against him, which is even funnier when you think about it. It's like, here's a blaster from his own ship. We'll use it against him. And they all picked up arms. Like some of them, took a fall, for the cause, but it was just hilarious. And I have to say, I really enjoyed that scene. So, Din finally makes his way back to Kuil, and he has to tell Kuil, I've got to get, I don't know, my ship is messed up, it's bad. And Kuil's like, well, you got to get your parts back. You're going to have to speak the Jawas. There's no other way around this. And of course it's unfair. It's completely unfair, but that's just how, the way things go. I did want to ask you about what your thoughts were about the cooperation that Din finds himself in, having to cooperate, and how he navigates the galaxy like a pro. Like, while he was reluctant to do this,
you could tell with these interactions, he's not much of a people person. Like when Grief Karga, he says, "Oh, you've already done these bounties. Why don't you come with me? We'll go to the spa or whatever." And I'm sure Grief Karga knows that that Din never takes off his helmet. So I'm sure by spa there's something that he could, do that. Because I'm trying to make a picture that him going into a spa, and it's like, that doesn't sound like it would be comfortable for him. But I guess there's a way around it. So since he's not a people person, and now he's actually being forced to associate with people, that it's like you're seeing how he's getting really annoyed by it. And I love the bit too where Kuil looks at the child and he's like, this is what all the fuss was about. This little kid, and he just, and seeing the little cute baby eat the frogs, which is kind of like a meta joke, because everybody joked that, oh, Yoda, it's like Kermit the Frog or something like that, but done better. And now you're seeing him eat frogs. And even in Attack of the Clones, when Yoda got to use his lightsaber, you see him leaping around like a frog. And so to see the child eat a frog, it's a little, okay, that's a little weird. But it was funny because, he's like when he first insists, oh, my ship's been destroyed, and Jawa's like, or the Kuil's like, no, it's just taken apart. They just, just have to barter with him. Like, it's no big deal. And you can tell he's just so fed up with it. And it's just funny how they just set off trekking into the rain, and he's got the blurg pulling the cart. And of course the blurgs, I like that they use blurgs too, because they first showed up in the Ewok movies. and they as like stop motion animation type guys, and now here we're seeing them like back in live action CG. I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah, they did such a great job with this. And as you said, this is clearly the Star Wars universe. We're nowhere other than Star Wars here. And after Kuiil convinces Din that he has to parlay with the Jawas, Din has this what seems to be an impossible thing that he has to do, which is to get that Mudhorn egg from the lair of the Mudhorn. And that Mudhorn confrontation was so glorious because I noticed how Din just wasn't going to give up the fight against the Mudhorn, excuse me, that clearly had outmatched him, didn't it?
Yeah, and it's like it was funny because like when they're talking to the Jawas, shoots the flamethrower at the Jawas. How about this? And that's another character moment we learned is that he says his weapons are his religion, and it's like, okay, but even though the Jawas accept his offer to go get the egg, they don't lend him any of his weapons to help him do it, which I thought was interesting. So that when he goes into the cave and he's shining the light around.
You broke up just a bit there. Catherine, are you still with me? Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
yeah. So
okay, I'm sorry.
How the child is just sitting outside the cave, just kind of twiddling around watching, and then Din Djarin suddenly gets thrown out and getting beat up pretty good. And it of course, had flashbacks to, the Reek from the Genosian arena, which Jango just took out with a simple pistol shot. But the Jawas wouldn't give Din his weapons back, so now he's just stuck. He ends up with nothing more than a little knife, and his armor's all busted up from being hit by the Mudhorn. And I like how he almost, he gets on his knees, and he almost, you could tell, and that's one of the great things about the design of this mask, is that you could read so much emotion into it, and you feel almost like he's reluctantly accepted that this is it, and then the moment comes, and you kind of know what's going to happen. It's like, yeah, we get it. We've seen the kid try and do the Force heal already. We've seen that, okay, clearly, even though it's 50 years old, it's still a baby, so it's not like they want it for its intelligence. It's like, no, they want it for the power. And so once that moment happens and the kid, that's super close up on its hand, it's like, wow. And the way Din just kind of reacts to it, and I was yelling at the screen, it's like, move, you idiot. The kid clearly can't hold it for very long, and he waits till almost it's too late to, kill the Mudhorn.
I felt the same way. I mean, clearly everybody who's a Star Wars fan knew exactly what was going to happen. We get to see Baby Yoda use the Force finally because he couldn't use it the previous time. And, I kind of think it's interesting because was this the first time we saw the Force used in this context? Like, for example, this particular character has never used the Force to do something like this before. So, this is a first time use. Maybe he was in the Jedi Temple for a long time, which we happen to know now because we've seen more of the series, but he probably, I'm guessing, may have been hiding a lot of his powers. And now that he's out, he doesn't have all those armed people around him, and he senses that he has to do something or that there may be danger. This might be one of the first times in his life that he's doing something like this. And I really like that he felt he could
right.
do that.
It's like he uses the powers only when he feels he needs to. Like when he was at the where we first met the child, it's like, okay, he was not just in the cradle, but the shield was closed on it. So he can't really see or hear what's going on outside. He's just sitting there, okay, I'm a little baby, whatever. But he understands now that he's been taken out. He may not process the fact that he was literally rescued by Din Djarin, but he recognizes now, because they're out in the middle of nowhere, he's dependent on him, which is why he insisted on healing Din Djarin. He saw that Din saved him from those other guys. And so now that they're once again trapped in a seemingly unwinnable situation, he's got to do something. And he does it. And I thought it was interesting also that it really takes the energy out of the kid, and he's passed out for what seems like several hours. And so it's like once he gets, Mando comes back with the egg, and you have that funny bit where it's like, you thought they would use this egg for something special. It's like, no, we're just going to cut it open and just eat it right now. It's just really funny. And so when they're on their way back, Kuiil tells them that, wait, can you explain that to me again? Like, what did the kid do? And he tells them, he's like, I've heard stories about this before, but I didn't realize that little kids could, do something like, and that I thought was really surprising, because with Kuiil saying he has lived several lifetimes, you would think that would mean he would have been around at the time when the Jedi Order was still there and big in the Republic. So I'm guessing that must mean that he must have been living a life deep in the Outer Rim, like way out there, away from the influence of the Jedi, to not be familiar with the concept of the Force too much. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah. So
I'm
that
sorry,
was
go
a
ahead.
real kind of surprise, and I like how they do a lot in and of itself. That does a lot of world building to tell you that yes, there are still plenty of corners in the Star Wars galaxy where people haven't heard of things as big as the Force and the Jedi before.
Yeah, that's very insightful, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And I would imagine he'd be exactly in a location like what you said, or maybe in a mine somewhere where the Jedi are not ever going to go down into. And maybe he spent several hundred years in there, and now he's been freed after the Empire was dissolved. Through luck only. Because there are probably groups of people who still haven't been liberated from Imperial rule. And he did mention that he, or at some point, was a victim of imperial slavery. But I also am kind of curious, why do you think they kind of made or indicated that Din was somewhat ignorant of the use of the Force? And presumably, maybe even many foundlings in his generation, are they ignorant of the Force, and why haven't they been told about it?
Yeah, that's something I was wondering too. So I got the sense, especially when you meet Bo-Katan in season 2, that I mean, yes, there are certain cultural things about Din Djarin, but I was thinking more it was a cult. It's like, okay, you can't take your helmets off. The way the armor was really grilling him about that, and the whole "this is the way." It's like, yeah, we all love it and it's fun, but that sounds like something cult people do, like the little catchphrase, "Oh, this is the way. No, take off the helmet or fight." And they never did explain, at least not so far, as to where the Children of the Watch initially took Din Djarin when they first rescued him, because at the time they rescued him, it was still the Clone Wars. The Empire, Mandalore is still in a state of civil war at this point. So I'm assuming they must have had a somewhere out in the Outer Rim where they were living, and that it was only once the Empire really kicked into full gear they had to go underground. So it could be because they've been living on the outskirts through much of living in hiding through much of Din Djarin's life, because we saw how young he looked in the flashback scene. He like maybe 7 or 8 years old, or it may be younger when he first gets rescued. So I'm guessing they were just simply living underground at some, like not necessarily literally underground, but like at some off way outer rim type world, and we're just out of that life. And because it's such a cult, and because of what the Jedi did to them, maybe they just don't want to talk about the Jedi. They don't want to teach the kids about the Jedi, especially since no sooner than Din Djarin is rescued, it's like within a year. I mean, they don't specify when exactly in the Clone Wars it was, but we know that right at the end of the Clone Wars, the Jedi get exterminated. So it's like, oh, maybe they didn't feel the need to tell him about it, or they didn't care because they're so much into their own thing. Like even the way when Bo-Katan first greets him, and I can't remember the character's name, but it was the male actor standing next to her in the suit. He's like, he's one of them, like it's like, oh, this isn't just a random sect. This is something else, like something really out there. So I'm guessing it was just extreme isolationism with this particular sect, and why he didn't. Whereas if he were, say, a teenager at the time that he was rescued, then he most certainly would have known about the Jedi.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and it's something that we have to keep in mind, that there may be groups like this out there that have, are Mandalorian, but they just have these different beliefs, and those beliefs either were done for protection or for other purposes. But I think it is very interesting. And after Din delivers the egg, and his ship is repaired with the help of Kuil, he heads to Navarro to deliver the Mountie, and it is heavy-hearted, isn't it? Like we just saw him kind of protecting the child, and the child protecting him, and now we're confronted with the fact that he has to surrender the child to the client in episode 3, the sin, which is quite a topsy-turvy thing. Even the music is very kind of somber, and and the music in this.
Right.
I'm
And
sorry.
what's really strange about that is at the end of the second episode, when he leaves Arvala 7, he apparently has felt he's made enough of a friend of Kuil that he offers him a job on his ship, and because he really likes his company. And it's like, okay, so he's learning to like people now. But Kuil's like, no, I've served too many people. I don't want to. Thank you for bringing peace to my valley. See you later. And so the fact that he's already opening up to Kuil makes it even stranger that he's so willing to give up the kid. Because I assumed that when he was taking the kid back in there, that it was his plan from the get-go to, okay, get the money, or in this case, it would be getting the Beskar and then come back and free the kid. But that's not it, because he gets the Beskar, he goes back to the armor, gets the whole suit made, and then he's ready to take off again and after getting more assignments. And I'm like, whoa, you weren't going to go back. And of course, I thought the whole third episode was a little predictable. It's like, of course he's going to renege, he's going to go save the kid, and the other or the other Mandalorians are going to save him. To me, that was all, yeah, that's a given. But I like you, I was very surprised that after he's been sort of bonding with this kid and connecting with him as another foundling, and even befriending people like Kuil, that he would just still, oh, no, I'm going to give the kid up and I'm going to leave.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because we have a situation where he even admits to the armorer, who is his commander or confidant or whatever you want to call her, that he helped me, but he didn't know he was my enemy. And he's even kind of like, the words are getting jumbled. It is true that he viewed the bounty as an enemy, but then I think he came to the realization that the bounty actually was a foundling. And now he's realized that, oh my God, this isn't a bounty. This is a foundling. I messed this up big time. And that's when he kind of like thought, yeah, I can't do this. That's just a child. I think when he thought that this particular asset was 50, that it was something that was older. And even upon seeing the asset, knowing it was 50, he convinced himself this is a 50-year-old asset. But I think that eventually he came to his senses and realized there's so much more out there in the galaxy and the universe I haven't seen that I don't know about. And there is something special about this being that looks like a child that is 50. I think that he made that conscious decision, but it took him a while to get there. And the armorer didn't tell him that he had to go and do that. But he hadn't fully disclosed everything to the armorer, right, Catherine?
Right, he didn't, because even the armor asks when he says, "Oh, it didn't know it was an enemy," and she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" She looks at him, and again, and granted, it's through the mask, but you could tell the way she lifts her head up. It's like she's like, "What?" But he doesn't really, and she's like, "Okay, if that's what you say." So then she just made the regular pauldron for the rest of the armor, and it's not until he gets back in the ship, because when he did have the little kid on the ship, Grogu had pulled the knob on one of the levers off and was playing with it. And so when he goes back to take off with his new list of bounties, and Grief Karga was surprised that, really, after you went on this big expensive job, you want to go out on more bounties? He's like, yes, just give it to me. No more small talk. And yet he reaches to pull that lever and the knob is gone. And that kind of brings it back to him that, this is just a little kid. And he just gets up and you're like, yep, here we go. And I thought it was kind of interesting because at first he does a little bit of surveillance, and he has this like X-ray type vision, and he snoops in on this conversation between the client and Dr. Pershing.
Yes.
And the client seems to be very reluctant to allow Dr. Pershing to run a test. He's like, okay, do it, but then we gotta, get moving. And so sure enough, when Mando goes in there, when the Din Djarin goes in there to save the kid, and Dr. Pershing strangely is trying to act like he's very, caring. Oh no, they were going to kill the kid, which is true. But he's like, oh, I'm the one who tried to save it. It's only alive because of me. And then Din just looks at what's going on. And you have, of course, the interrogation droid from the original Star Wars. And it's like, yeah, that just symbol of all kinds of evil going on. And so Din just smacks this guy down to the ground. And I guess he was going to maybe question him, because I would imagine that he would have just pulled out his pistol and shot him, because he has no aversion clearly to killing people and things. But of course, Dr. Pershing was able to sneak out before Din could find out more information, and at least he was able to save the baby. And then, tries to shoot his way out, but of course he shoots his way into a Mexican standoff where we have, and it's interesting because now it's Grief Karga turning against him. And after he's been trying to be all, oh, buddy, and all that, it's like, oh, okay, that friendship clearly didn't go very far, because you have that great shot in the bar where Grief Karga's sitting there, and all of a sudden all the tracking fobs start going off.
Yeah, and as soon as he acquires the asset again and all the fobs go off, it's like the question is, how do you flee a planet on the run full of bounty hunters? And you do it by being as clever as Din, and by getting assistance from your fellow watch Mandalorians, who, I don't know about you, Catherine, but that was one of my favorite scenes of the first 3 episodes, was seeing, we knew the jetpacks worked from the Clone Wars. We've seen this a lot. We've seen them zip on through, but this is the first time we've seen it in live action, really, other than Boba Fett, in that one time where, and maybe some Jango Fett, but this was so many Mandalorians just diving in and just swooping in gently. And even the heavy Mando who he had to fight with, he's like, go, get out of here. It just swoops in, and they had his back. And it was so good. It was so good.
Yeah, even the rival who had tried to rip his helmet off and was really upset with him, even he shows up with like a huge like minigun and even tells Din at some point to, get out of here, we'll handle this, and it's just like this big shootout, and Din manages to make his way back to his ship, and then Grief Karga suddenly steps out, and it's like, oh, here we go, and Din, surprised at this point, he's not going to listen to Grief's appeals, and he just shoots him. And I did actually notice earlier, some people thought it was contrived that he had the thing. This happened to have the best card, but you actually saw it earlier. There's like a brief shot in the bar where you kind of see his hand in it, putting the thing in there. So they did set that up earlier. And of course, you couldn't kill off Grief Karga that early with Carl Weathers. Like, no, he's going to be back. And so I did like that he survived, but I also liked that Din Djarin showed that, look, you can pretend to be my friend, but after you just burned me like this, screw you, bam. And then, they take off, and sure enough, no sooner that they start taking off, Grogu gets back up out of his cradle to take the knob back to start chewing on it again, and then you have that same rival Mandalorian riding up on his jetpack and gives like the salute as the leaving of Apollo 7. So that was like, or leaving Navarro rather, and so
Yes.
these whole 3 episodes felt like the first act of a movie. And that's what I really liked about it, because the pacing in film and television is very different. Like if you were watching a movie and it took this long to get through the first act, you would think, "Oh, what's going on?" But this works so well as a show. And like I was saying, I love the second episode because it's
Catherine, are you still there?
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm here. So we're like, so I love that was all character development, and then it's like a little nice conclusion to your first act of the story, and it did just such an enormous amount of character building with like, okay, he's like in a cult, and but he's also a foundling, and he has pity on this child, and he's bonding with. Yeah, so as far as writing and character development goes, I thought those first 3 episodes did a really great job. And it was also equal parts plot development and character development. So it feels like we're watching chapters in a movie.
It really did. And I have to say that everything came full circle. He found him, then lost, he was lost, he was found, he gave him away, and then got him back. And, it was a feel good moment. Honestly, I felt great after the end of that episode when, when little baby Yoda grabbed that shifting knob, as you said. Another thing that I have to say is that since, those first 3, as you said, episodes did feel like they went together, I just loved, just overall the tone that they set for Din and for the child going forward, because we kind of know what's going to happen in the story. We know he's taking this child in as a foundling, and we know that he's going to have to report this to the armorer at some point, and she's going to probably say, okay, you have this foundling and this is what needs to be done, or something like that. And it just was so cleverly done, so well executed. The costumes, the Mandalorians, armor looked fantastic. Even before he got his incredible shiny Beskar armor, he was undeniably a Mandalorian, and we got to see a lot of Mandalorians in this. And also we got to see other creatures as well in the Star Wars universe. And I just really enjoyed it so much. I think they did a fantastic job. The music set the tone so well.
Yeah, I was going to say that the whole theme music that they came up for this is so iconic and memorable.
Yeah, it really was. And, I've been playing that music for the past 2 years since this episode came out in 2019. That goes to show you how great they are. And, we did, obviously, it did feel like a Western, as we know that it's kind of like a space opera. It's influenced by Westerns, but even the blurg writing and all the sort of adventures that Din has had really was just a wonderful tidbit just into what it might be like to be a bounty hunter and have to deal with all of these different things that are going on. And of course, these first 3 episodes were a huge success for Filoni and Favreau, and just the effort that they put into this. They use the new technology to give us those landscapes and beautiful cinematography views that gave us these worlds and made them come to life. I really have to say, I just love what they did, as well as the two other actors, the stunt actors who played Din in the series, whose names I can't remember, but they also added a lot to the realism in regards to the fighting for the Mandalorian and their ability to fight, which was essential. We had to see Mandalorians fighting the way we know them, let's say in the Clone Wars and in other depictions, whether it be comic books, regular books, wherever, on any of the movies. We needed to see the Mandalorians fighting. So I say that this really was just such a success. And I loved these first three episodes. And yeah, any final thoughts on the first three?
I love that it feels like it's its own mini movie, and that's like a great way to start a series. And then it starts going off in some interesting directions for the middle part of the season, which we will get to for sure.
Excellent. And I feel the same way you do. And I just wanted to say thank you for joining me and reviewing these first three episodes of The Mandalorian Season 1, episodes 1 through 3. And for those of you who are watching this, we're going to have more episodes where we continue to review the Mandalorian TV series, Season 1, as well as Season 2, leading up to the anticipated Book of Boba Fett that comes out on December 29th. And Catherine, thank you so much for taking the time out to meet with me to do this review, which is a lot of fun. And where can people find you, Catherine?
You can find me at Slice Night on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me active on the Phantasmagorium Show Facebook page every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific. You can find me on the Phantasmagorium Show YouTube channel hosting Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns. And it's a James Bond podcast show. We have a lot of fun there. Every second and fourth Sunday of the month on the Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel at 8 a.m. Pacific time, I host a show called The Unifying Force about philosophy and Star Wars. That's also really fun. And I just recorded a Ghostbusters Afterlife review for Cinema Gulp that should be up soon. That was really fun too.
That's wonderful. I look forward to seeing you there. And for my viewers, thank you for watching Positive Fandom today. You can also find me on the Bird Network. And for those of you who are out there, always remember, be kind.